Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is exactly 9:27, and all I can say is it must be the stage 6 load shedding that seems to be impacting on all of the connectivity with our guests this morning. So we do apologize for that. Next, we have Rizwana Samad online. She is an economist, and we are going to be looking at the issue around the economy having expanded by 0.6% in the second quarter of 2023, and these stats were released by Stats South Africa. Rizwana, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam, and jazakallah for having me.
Lovely to talk with you. Now, I'm looking at the figure here, 0.6%. Does it make a difference at all to our economy?
Well, it does make a difference in terms of the quarter growth. In the first quarter, the economy grew by 0.4%. The second quarter, the economy grew by 0.6%. So we're effectively tracking at a growth rate of just below 1% for the first half of the year. It does make a dent. Obviously, the higher the growth rate, the better for in terms of employment prospects, tax collection, and overall prosperity in the economy. And I must note that throughout consensus and analyst forecasts for the second quarter, the growth expectation was much less than the 0.6% that we actually achieved. So it does indicate that the economy is a little more resilient than we had initially expected.
Okay, now we understand that manufacturing and finance were among the 6 industries that showed substantial growth between April and June. Do you expect this trend to continue till year end?
It's a bit difficult because in the second quarter, what had happened was we had lower stages of load shedding. Essentially, the effective stage of load shedding in the first quarter was between 5 and 6, and in the second quarter, that fell between 2 and 3. And as a result of lower stages of load shedding, we did see manufacturers and miners, so essentially our heavy energy users, take advantage of more energy availability by producing more. Now we're already in the third quarter, and we're already experiencing stage 6 load shedding currently. And so this will negatively impact the productive capacity of the economy in the third quarter and possibly into the fourth quarter as well. Our electricity minister has indicated that things are likely to get much worse in the last quarter of the year from an energy availability perspective. So we're not expecting this momentum to be maintained for the rest of the year purely because of the uncertainty with regards to electricity in South Africa.
And top of all of that, we have a fuel price increase, which is probably the highest that it's been in a very long time. And at the start of the show this morning, I also made a comment that it's once again the poorest of the poor that will be hit hardest, because it is the poorest of the poor that are totally reliant on paraffin. They use the paraffin for their primer stoves. So that's going to be quite a blow, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. What we're seeing is that consumers and households have come under pressure across the board. If you look at our GDP data, consumers make up or drive more than 60% of growth in South Africa. And what we have been seeing over the last 3 quarters was that growth in household consumption has been slowing. And in the second quarter of this year, it contracted or declined by 0.3%. So it does indicate that households are significantly under pressure because of very high interest rates currently, because of high food inflation, and now probably being driven by a high transport or fuel costs that could dent consumer demand even further in the second half of the year. So even though the economy performed fairly well in the first half of the year, given the circumstances, a very weak consumer base, given all of the headwinds that we mentioned, will probably keep growth under pressure in the second half of the year because of the factors that you and I have mentioned.
And obviously, that indicates a huge drop in productivity in the transport sector, because with fuel hikes
Mm.
as they're sitting at the moment, that isn't going to bode well at all. And we're going to see a further decline in that area. And we also understand that the communication sectors were the biggest drag on the economy. Would we know why?
So in terms of transport and communication, transport being negatively impacted by the logistical constraints that Transnet is facing, rail, port, as well as road transport coming under a bit of pressure. But also transport is dependent on trade, and we saw trade, retail and wholesale trade contracting in the second quarter of the year, also indicative of weak consumer demand. So it's across the value chain there where we saw a decline in trade, catering, accommodation, and decline in transport productivity as well. In terms of communication, it is unclear there, but it does indicate that our telecoms, in terms of the research that we have done, our telecoms industry has the highest electricity intensity. So they
Sure.
are worst impacted by the load
Goodness.
shedding relative to all of the other products and services that we consume.
Absolutely. And we're all feeling the brunt of that, aren't we? Let me just digress here a bit, Rizwana, and let's look at the housing market. What is this all? How is this all impacting on the housing market right across the board? Lower income, middle income, and of course the higher income groups. What sort of movement are we seeing in the housing market? Because undoubtedly, with the economy, being where it is at the moment, there isn't that income, and banks, of course, are not, forwarding the loans because there is this uncertainty in the market right now.
Yeah. With interest rates as high as it is, what we have seen is that demand for mortgages have eased quite substantially since the start of this year, and that will undoubtedly impact property prices negatively. But what we're also seeing is that this big inequality in the property space as well. So the high income consumers and the high income earners will continue to demand a property in that value perspective, but it is essentially the low and middle income that are feeling the pressure of high interest rates and are steering clear of purchasing houses to the extent that they were in the last 2 years. We're also seeing, I can't quote the figures, but we're also seeing different regions in the country outperform from a property perspective. We know the Western Cape has seen an influx of employees in terms of population size as well, and so that has driven up or supported property prices there. But other regions, particularly inland regions, have seen property prices grow by very low single digits because of the immigration that we had during COVID, but also now because of high interest rates that are keeping the lower and middle income out of that market essentially for now.
Let me just stretch you a little more, please, Rizwana. Do indulge me. It's September already, and we know that people have already started making plans for the year-end holidays. What is
Mm.
it that they need to take into consideration with the weak rand? I think for most of us, overseas holidays are totally off the table, but local holidays, given what is playing out in KZN, we're not quite sure in terms of with load shedding, we being in in stage 6, what the situation is going to look like closer towards year end. They also, KZN has huge water and sewage problems, as you are well aware of. What's that all going to do to the tourism trade, which they are so dependent on, very especially come December?
Yeah. So what we have been seeing, given the significant infrastructure backlogs and problems that have played up over the past 18 months, is that tourism in South Africa has grown, but not to the extent that it has pre-COVID. And bulk of the tourist influx has been to the Western Cape because of the better infrastructure there, and lower crime prevalent there. So in terms of the December period, it is likely to be quite bleak from a local tourism perspective. I mean, we're going to see movement in terms of local tourism and probably international tourists as well. But I think businesses would have, would need to have electricity and water mitigants or alternative to counter the disruptions from the municipality and from Eskom itself. So what we hear from government itself, directly from the electricity minister, is that energy availability will be low as it was in December of last year.
Sure.
So a similar sort of scenario this year. So from a tourist perspective, I think that I guess personally as well, indulging low energy activities, parks and other recreational type of
Rather go into the bush for a holiday. You'll be safest there. Rizwana, my final question to you then is, hopefully there are people who do have some surplus cash. If they want to invest now and get a good return on investment, what would where do you think they'd be best placed? I mean, a small business is out of the question now with the electricity situation, energy situation being what it is. Would it be feasible for them to look at the housing market?
Look, as a disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor.
I know.
I can't really provide a financial advice, but right now, what seems quite prudent is cash in terms of the rates being provided by banks and other financial institutions, cash returns, so essentially savings or fixed deposits, are quite lucrative given high interest rates that we currently have in South Africa. So essentially, savers will be benefiting from high interest rates, and obviously, people with debt, they will be negatively impacted.
Right. Okay. And so if you have debt, try and pay it off, because that's the most prudent thing to do. Thank you. I do know that you're not allowed to give financial advice, but as an economist, I just kind of wondered, how you would, if you had the surplus cash, what you would do. Thank you indeed for that. Lovely talking with you this morning. Go well, and Salaam Alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam.
That was Rizwana Samad. She's an economist talking to us about the marginal rate that we're enjoying here, the quarter-on-quarter real GDP rate, and it's been adjusted. It is 0.6%. I guess depending on which side of the fence you are, you could be jumping up and down for joy, or just kind of say, so how's it going to impact on my life? It's not going to make any real difference. Anyway, we hold thumbs that things will improve right across the board in every aspect of our lives, inshallah. Standing by to talk to us is Stephanie Fick. She is going to take up from where Wayne Duvenage was unable to continue with that discussion because of poor connectivity. We're going to pick up on that Steinhoff story once again. So please stay with us, and we'll be wrapping up with a human interest story. Someone in the Cape is going to talk to us about Western Cape's hope for the blind community. This is News and Views with me, Julie Ali.